At this Taurus New Moon, we discuss the role of Zeus in abundance and material success and how the great benefic distributes rewards. Hey there, Truth Seeker. Welcome to the Star Kittens community where we discuss 13 sign astrology. Are you in alignment with your divine design? Do you want to master the metaphysical reality? Open the doors of perception. Each planetary body is an archetype, a template, if you will, that helps us interpret human behavior in the world around us. The more awake and aware we are, the more synchronicity will show up in your life. Our focus today is the Taurus New Moon and its trine to Zeus in Virgo. To help us reach more souls with this important message, please like, share and subscribe. There is a lot going on, so let's jump in. Kia ora, David.
Kia ora.
We are in the middle of Taurus season, and Taurus is one of those constellations. It takes the sun longer than 30 days to go through. And at the new moon that's coming up in June, which here in New Zealand happens on the 15th of June at 2:54 p.m, the sun and moon are conjunct at 30 degrees Taurus. So let's start there. Let's talk about this Taurian energy.
So the first thing I'd say is if it takes how long to get through Taurus, the sun?
About 35 days.
So that means that there's another 5 days or so left of the sun to transit, which is probably a nice place just to talk about initially, insofar as what that means is that in the 12 sign system, people who have planetary bodies, a rising sign, a sun, a moon, a Mars, whatever planetary body you're talking about, at 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 degrees, what's after Taurus, Gemini, those are actually Taurian energies, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees Gemini start 5 days later in the 13 sign system than in the 12 sign system. So if anybody listening straight away is thinking it's at 30 degrees Taurus, I'm on the cusp, and in fact there's another 5 days, and it's the last, usually the very beginning and the very ending of signs is where they're the most intense and the most concentrated. And so this new moon, being positioned where it is, both on the cusp of what the 12 signers would call the very last degree, but what we're saying is the last 5 degrees, has a certain intensity about it. But with all of that said, Taurus in and of itself isn't particularly difficult to interpret in astrology, and in fact most people will be aware that Taurus energy is represented by, its spirit animal, which is well known to be the bull, and the bull representing on the one side fertility and strength and power, but on the other side, of course, the side of the bull is it can be aggressive, it can be stubborn, and it can be difficult to move as well. So the bull energy can go either way depending on how Taurus or Taurians, or those who are expressing Taurus energy, choose to focus on either the positive or negative aspects of Taurus. And it's also probably equally well known that Taurus is the second house, and it is therefore the house of what we would call resources, or what most astrologers would call resources. I think we're all pretty much aligned on the fact that Taurus is the house of resources, but for us those resources aren't just material or monetary resources. They can also be the resources that are to do with our physical expression. So in other words, our skills. So anything that we do physically, I believe, because Taurus is an earth sign and Taurus involves resources, well, our body is a resource. So if we are using our bodies to make money, for example, and that needn't necessarily be in, out there constructing houses or being a plumber or in the trades, a builder. It might be somebody who sits at a desk and uses their hands to tap at a keyboard. It could be somebody who uses a mouse to design, whilst the output of that skill is maybe digital or some other form of expression, the input is definitely physical. So for us, Taurus talks to the physical, the full gamut of physical resources, which means our environment and our physical bodies, and all of that is wrapped up together in this idea of the earth and the Taurian energy. So it's the physical environment, and it's the body, and it's the skills, so the resources that we draw from the earth, and it's also what we do with our bodies in terms of developing resources and managing resources as well. So I just thought I'd kind of make that point, because many, especially novices or learners of astrology, will immediately associate Taurus with money. And yes, money is obviously part of it, but money isn't everything. And, you know, you can have, like we have here, a very rich environment around us with birds, a small garden outside, a beautiful view of the horizon, of mountains in the distance, and we are very much in nature, and those are also resources, and they are expressions of abundance too. You know, so the earth energy is very much linked to abundance, and of course the other thing that most people will know about Taurus is that the ruling planet or guardian of Taurus is Venus, a feminine sign. So briefly, a new moon, or even a full moon, but a new moon in this case in Taurus, is relating to our physical environment and our body and our experiences of life that we have via the five senses, the five physical senses of touch, of taste, of sight, of sound and scent. That's how we experience and interact with the physical world. So anything to do with those things, touch, taste, sight, sound and scent, are aspected, are highlighted, are in focus at this particular new moon, which suggests to me, as a new moon energy, is a reset of sorts. It's the beginning of a 28-day cycle. It also could be, of course, a beginning of something is the ending of something else. So it's the end of a 12-month period if we go back to the last time the sun was in this position. So it's the closing of a cycle and the beginning of a new cycle. And, you know, sometimes it's helpful when you're thinking about your physical experience to go back and think, where was I exactly 12 months ago in the physical, in terms of my physical resources, my physical skills, my body? Am I in great shape or am I in worse shape? How are my finances? What do my resources look like? What sort of environment am I living in? Have I let it uplift me, or has it deteriorated in that period? These are the sorts of things that you might reflect on at a new moon. So it's a reset, or an opportunity to reset our physical environment or our body, and that may mean an exercise regime. It may mean changing some things that you do. It may mean refining those five senses in some way. We can train our taste buds. We can train our touch and our sense of touch. We can certainly train ourselves when it comes to listening and to scent and sight as well. So, you know, a tune-up, a reset of those capabilities, of those faculties of the human body. It's a chance to review where we are at physically and materially, and to make adjustments.
I love it when we really use these moon cycles where a new moon is let's do a reset. And I think it really resonates with me at the moment to do a physical reset. Let's start maybe a whole new recipe book for this new 28-day cycle, or a new way of looking at physical activity. Set up a little a schedule of, these days I want to go for a walk, these days I want to go to the gym, etc. So it's nice to use these lunar cycles to implement change in your life. Now we plot close to 20 planetary bodies from your standards of Jupiter and Saturn, but also the more lesser known, like Vesta and Juno. And of all of them, the Sun, Moon are making one aspect, and it's making a trine with Zeus. And Zeus is sitting at 30 degrees in Virgo. So let's hone in on that one.
Yep. So Zeus we'll touch on again. So you've got two earth signs in play here. You've got the Virgo energy and the Taurus energy as well. So we have a double earth focus coming through. And the trine, of course, is immensely positive. And Zeus or Jupiter, two sides of the same coin, represents broadly expansion. So in this case, it would be expansion of the physical realm and expansion of the physical experience, which means that if we are putting in the work and the effort, as I touched on before, if we are deploying our resources in a positive way with an attitude of gratitude, we may find that during this period we have an amplification of that. We may have an expansion of our material resources. And it's also a good time when you talk about starting things or projects. It might be a great time to kick off or reinvigorate a home improvement plan, to rent a room, to turn that holiday home into an Airbnb. These are all things that are using resources and using the expansion and of energy of Zeus or Jupiter to improve your financial position. It could be that you reconfigure your finances or invest in some new skills. These are all positive steps, positively affirming steps that somebody could take under a Taurus new moon that is in trine to Zeus. So Zeus or Jupiter being a benefic energy, a highly favourable energy, a tailwind energy, if you like. I was also going to say before that under this Taurus energy, it's a good time to declutter. I'm sitting here at your desk and I see that it's rather clean.
Good day.
Is that part of you picking up the vibe, is it?
I think so.
That's excellent. So let's, as I touched on last time and as we have done in the past, I think that when you look into any astrological symbol, particularly one that we haven't spoken a lot about before, and particularly one where there's two names for Zeus and Jupiter, and the reason that is because you've got a Greek version and a Roman version. So let's have a look at the mythology of Zeus, and then let's have a look at an astrological interpretation. So let's just have a quick look at what the Greeks and the Romans talked about, how they created stories and myths and legends about this sign, that here we are doing an astrological interpretation, and whoever it is, the space agencies, or I'm not sure actually, I've never really queried that, and we can find out, I guess, who names these planetary bodies. So it's so interesting that whoever does it, or whatever institution, if it is NASA or a space agency, it amazes me how often the resonances that come through, and we can do an astrological interpretation. I'm not sure that they're sitting there worried about the astrology. I'm pretty sure they're looking at the mythology. So let's start there and just have a quick thumbnail sketch about what Zeus actually represents in terms of the history, or as it is told. So Zeus is directly manifested and linked to the planet Jupiter, and as I've touched on, that is because the Greeks and the Romans had the same name for a similar deity. But when we're talking about Zeus, we're talking about an archetype of the guru, the benefactor, and also, as I touched on before, the principle of expansion. While the Greeks named the physical planet after Zeus, Western astrology utilizes the Roman name. But in fact, what we do is we use both. So we've got a placement for Jupiter on there, which is...
Jupiter is sitting at 26 degrees Gemini.
Right, so actually straight away we can see that they should be treated as similar energies, but are actually got their own distinct characteristics, and we've got them Zeus in Virgo and Jupiter in Gemini, right? So completely different. So we're talking about Zeus, just to be clear, but I'm referencing Jupiter just to correlate the names because of the Greeks and the Romans using different names. This isn't the only planetary body that's like this. There's Poseidon and Neptune is another. We've got Pluto and Hades. Yep, we've got Demeter and Mother Earth. There's a whole heap of these, right? So I've touched on that. So let's have a look at Zeus specifically, as the Greeks talked about him. And the archetypes that are linked to Zeus. And just again, to reinforce and to reiterate and repeat, why do we talk about archetypes when we're talking about astrology? Archetypes are designed as templates, as we say in our introductions and as we talk about. These are templates that help us to recognize characteristics and behaviors of certain personas or characters that we can, when we examine those and when we look at them and when we meditate or focus on these archetypes, we can use them as a mirror to our existence. So we can see ourselves in the archetype, or we can see others in the archetype. If we see ourselves in the archetype, we can then ask the question, are we exhibiting that archetype? Are we playing that role? Are we full force, full throttle expressing that in the world? Or we can use it to clarify the role that we might be playing in that archetype, or to get us back on track. See, for us, astrology is very much about what we call an astrological mosaic. And so if you see every planetary body as an archetype, then basically, how many is it that you mentioned before? 20?
Yeah.
So effectively, every time we cast a chart, it's like we are directors in a play casting 20 different roles. And clearly, it's not possible due to time, but also our ability to absorb. We can't talk about all 20, but what we have at any one time is this great cosmic play that's taking place regardless of whether we touch on it or not. But the way that we can relate to each astrological body, rather than planet, and we are careful to make that distinction as well. We don't just call them planets because there are more than planets. We use asteroids, we use what's called trans-Neptunians, and we use objects in the sky as well. So we call them planetary bodies, and each of these has their own energies, their own frequency, their own signature. And one of the ways as humans where we are wired and programmed to respond to stories, then we talk about the archetypes, and the archetypes, as I said, will help us to immediately recognize, that's a behavior that I could cultivate or develop in myself, or conversely, it might be a characteristic or a quality that you might see in a child, and that you might think, I can, work with them to bring that out as they're developing, or it could be a quality or a characteristic or an attribute that you might see in a friend, or even in leaders and people that are influencing us, and recognize it for what it is. And of course, all archetypes, which are characteristics, which are templates, which are principles that we can follow, which are attributes, they're basically actors that we can mimic, and we can take on what we want of those archetypes, and we can reject what we don't want. But it can serve to enlighten us to perhaps shadow aspects, i.e. aspects of the archetype that we are not engaging in, where, as I've talked before, there's a shadow side or a lazy side, and there's a positive and a negative side. And sometimes knowing the negative side of an archetype is very helpful in terms of us avoiding that behavior or pulling ourselves up, or in fact offering positive critiques or guidance or coaching to others who may be exhibiting or leaning towards the darker side of an archetype. So just to be clear, we're talking about the archetype of Zeus, and one of those archetypes in the history is that of the benefactor and the great benefic. So Zeus in history and mythology was considered to be a generous, incredibly generous king who distributed rewards, and is known in history as Fortuna Major, or the great benefic. I know certainly in Vedic astrology they talk about the great benefic. That's the Zeus or the Jupiter energy. In astrology, this archetype represents luck, good fortune, abundance and synchronicity. It signifies the areas of life where things flow smoothly and easily, gifts are received, opportunities are present. They present themselves rather. These opportunities present themselves rather effortlessly. I would actually add to that luck is more a reflection of the Uranian lightning, so we can have a lucky strike. So in the terms of abundance and material world, then a windfall would be actually Zeus conjunct Uranus, for example, or Venus conjunct Uranus might generate a windfall. But luck and good fortune is actually well favoured, and that, as I said before, is where you put in the work and the effort, you're likely to get well rewarded under these types of energies. So another archetype in the history of it is the philosopher and the seeker and the guru. So Zeus was seen as, in history, as the ultimate judge who sought high universal laws, order and cosmic truth. In terms of the astrological perspective on that, Zeus therefore translates into a seeker of wisdom, of higher education, philosophy and religion, which is interesting because Jupiter itself is actually the ruling planet or guardian of Sagittarius, which represents, of course, higher education, philosophy, religion, the higher mind, the arc of human drive to find meaning in existence, to formulate belief systems and understand the bigger picture of the universe. So whilst Zeus is not the guardian of Sagittarius, Jupiter certainly is the flip side of Zeus, and that is why Jupiter has been assigned to the sign of Sagittarius. So another archetype, there is many of Zeus, is that of the ruler and the generous leader. So Zeus was considered to be the king of Olympus, and Zeus represented therefore sovereignty, authority and divine law. And in terms of astrological interpretation of that, unlike Saturn, which represents leadership through restriction, fear and rules and command and control structures and overlord type systems, the Zeus archetype represents leadership through vision and inspiration. So this is more, I would say Saturn's more of a manager and Zeus would be more of a leader. So Zeus is related definitely to leadership, to vision, and the archetype of a benevolent leader who instills hope and confidence in others rather than trying to whip them. So it's the classic carrot and stick. So Zeus would be the carrot, and Saturn as a leader archetype would be the stick. And we also have, as I touched on before, let's just dive quickly into the shadow side of Zeus. Of course, when we're talking about Zeus / Jupiter, we're talking about expansion. So if we're talking about a shadow side, we're also talking about the darkness and the worst of Zeus being expanded. And that can be, in mythology, Zeus was prone to extreme arrogance, to hubris, to overindulgence, and crossing boundaries without consequences. Zeus thought he was untouchable and above the law, especially when it came to marital infidelities. The stories are that he had many different lovers and a long-suffering wife, and some of the offspring of Zeus, which are known in the astrological mosaic. Pallas Athena, for example, is one of those, but there are many others. But if that shadow side of Zeus is that overexpansion, that being prone to arrogance, hubris, overindulgence, I don't like necessarily the 7 deadly sins, but it makes the point that basically you're indulging in the 7 deadly sins. I don't even know what they all are, but I think one of them might be gluttony, for example, is definitely one. So that's a shadow side of overexpansion, especially when we tie it back to the Taurus energy, is that people can actually go, well, how much is enough? And they may not realise that they've eaten enough, or they have enough material wealth, or that they have enough resources. They just keep going anyway. And that's a shadow side of Zeus, by the way, impacting on the Taurian energy. So an astrological expression of that, when poorly integrated or negatively aspected in a chart, either the collective or an individual chart, the archetype of Zeus manifests, as I touch on, as hubris, extravagance, overconfidence and excess. And it also represents the danger of being too much of a good thing, which ultimately leads to wastefulness, dogmatism, and a belief that one is above the law. So what we've done there is just gone through quickly some of the archetypes that are commonly associated with Zeus, and we've combined both the the history or the mythology quickly, and also what the archetype can mean and an astrological expression. The last thing I would say is that Zeus is infamous in mythology for his countless extramarital affairs and his ability to shapeshift to seduce his targets. Though his permanent wife and queen was his sister Hera, his infidelities created a permanent rift of jealousy and retaliation within a divine family. So, to avoid detection, Zeus took many forms, such as turning into a swan to approach Leda, a bull to abduct Europa, and even a shower of golden rain to reach Danae. These are all stories that are in the mythology that different people know, and they get reinterpreted and so on and so forth. But Zeus fathered many of the most prominent figures in Greek mythology, including Ares, the god of war, who we talked about last time, Ophiuchus, the god of fire and forge, which actually is related to Vulcanus, Eileithyia, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, Apollo, the goddess of music, the god of music and sun, Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, Hermes, the messenger god, also known as Mercury, Dionysus, the god of wine, Hercules or Heracles, the legendary hero, and Perseus, the slayer of Medusa. So there's a quick thumbnail of Zeus, and really that brings this interpretation to a close, I think.
That's awesome. A little history lesson for all those listening. We had a beautiful reading earlier this week, and it's such a privilege to help people get closer to their divine design using 13 sign astrology. So if you are at all intrigued to figure out what that is for you, get in touch. Either get yourself a chart or a natal reading. Figure out what you are meant to do, what planetary bodies can help you get to where you want to go. I look forward to starting this new moon with some changes in my life.
You have started already with this incredibly clean and clear desk.
We shall see.
And your new setup there with this very fancy stand-up desk setup that you've got. This is all to do with the physical world and how you express yourself. It's great, isn't it?
Yes, and moving towards my North Node, which is in Taurus.
Yep, I can also see what the Virgo energy with some things are very well organised. We've got a coiled up, very well organised and coiled up cord, and a pen just placed perfectly. And what is this thing here?
My little, I don't know, it's not really an organ, but kind of, yes.
Organ device.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure that you don't have those electromagnetic frequencies frying your brain.
That's right. Well, that's enough about me. Thank you, David. Ngā mihi.
Namaste.
Until next time.